Hi, my name is Lauren Martell, and I'm an attorney in Bluffton, South Carolina. I've been a member and participating in the Republican Party since 1984, and I have been a member and participating on and off throughout the years since 1992 in South Carolina. I have voted in all the elections that I have since I've been living here in South Carolina, and I have gone to the state convention a few different times and was so honored to go to the Republican National Convention this past summer in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was a grand event and really the kickoff to a really wonderful, I believe, new era in America. But what I have noticed in 2025, and this is extremely concerning and also somewhat urgent in nature, is that the 2025 reorganization from the South Carolina Republican Party was absolutely egregious, to the point where I believe that it did not fall under the South Carolina Title VII of the election laws. And that is critical. We can drill down on exactly what laws were violated or not really abided by. But I've watched over the last couple decades since I've lived here in South Carolina, the erosion of the Republican Party from what I once believed would be a true conservative platform, embracing the terminology set out in the Republican Creed, to what now I am witnessing and observing firsthand to be a tyrannical and basically almost communist style robotic way of handling the reorganization process and who's in and who's out. And they take out duly elected officers, even duly elected delegates. That happened to me in the Republican National Convention, and we had to appeal that, and we did win because they were wrong. So the state of South Carolina has gotten to a point where it's beyond self-policing itself. It's completely tied up in a web of corruption where it needs to have an outside investigation. And I believe that the process has gone through with all the different people who are leaders within the communities and the precincts and then the county conventions have raised enough red flags now, and then ultimately the state convention this past weekend, to arise to a level that it should certainly be investigated as to whether the South Carolina Republican Party should be decertified. And when I say decertified, I mean that they have not been transparent in their quarterly filings. They're saying they don't have to quarterly file with the South Carolina Election Commission or the South Carolina Ethics Commission. They do have certain duties that they need to file under the Federal Election Commission. It's sort of this vague entity that sort of does what it wants. For the longest time, there's sort of been a mantra, that, which isn't true, that it's a club and you're not in it, or it's a membership. It's an unincorporated entity that is loosely tied to the South Carolina state election laws. Some people are now saying that it's sort of a 527 PAC, but it's not really a PAC, and it doesn't have to abide by the PAC rules and regulations and guidelines. So it's kind of been its own little creature, and the creature has grown into something that it's morphed into something that it's not supposed to be. And I witnessed firsthand in 2025, being part of the process, the absolute manipulation of the rules, manipulation of the precinct level reorganization, the absolute control and tyrannical control that was involved, to the point where they were bringing in already elected officials, even trying to get judges and solicitors to influence the precinct reorganization. So I can drill down into that more as needed. But my biggest point in this whole thing is that the grounds for decertification of the political party are there. And it's a real problem with subversion on a level that's a national security issue, because particularly in Beaufort County, I witnessed people who believe that these machines work, and they may or may not have a vested interest in these machines, but whatever their position is, it's that they believe that the machines are here and here to stay. And they are trying to elect legislators who are going to vote to continue the machines and are going to vote for multi-million dollars to maintain software and hardware and the storing of these machines and things like that, which actually not a lot of people even know what happens to the machines when they're not being used. And there's a big problem with the chain of custody as well. But this is completely subversive to the most recent executive order that President Trump put out. And for these reasons alone, but I have multiple more, which I'll do on either another video, or if someone wants to call me to discuss these issues in more depth, I'm happy to do that. But this is a real problem in South Carolina, and we have full-on subversiveness to the President of the United States of his concern over election integrity. And what they're doing in South Carolina is pretty much the opposite. And they're in the ears of the legislators. And what happens is the Republican Party even put out an email that said to the elected officials, get involved if you want to keep your positions, because if you don't, and you don't get reelected, don't blame us. So most of these incumbent elected officials came and they got really involved, and they got involved to the point where they became delegates themselves, and that they endorsed whatever slate the Republican counties were putting out. In and of itself, that sounds like normal party politics. But where it gets super subversive is the gatekeeping of information, the gatekeeping of the delegates, the inability to allow other delegates, the America First delegates, to campaign or to even have their names out there. What they did in Beaufort, which is so egregious, and I think violates the spirit of the rules of the Republican Party, as well as is very questionable under Title VII of being in accordance with the law, which keeps them certified as a political party. And these two political parties are not serving the state of South Carolina. It's actually caused what we call a sort of uniparty type thing, where it keeps the people in the parties divided, yet the uniparty does what they want to do, which is more of a globalist agenda, which is unconstitutional, not abiding by the laws that are the good laws of our states that are already on the books, and creating chaos and over legislating things that shouldn't be over legislated. As Thomas Jefferson said, too many laws are like having no laws. We need to go back to the original intent of the Constitution and the original intent of the Founding Fathers, more of a not this tyrannical, like bureaucratic, beyond normal politics. This is, in my opinion, a communist style, where in my experience in Beaufort County, I had armed guards try to intimidate me from even going up and making a point of order for Robert's Rules of Order. I had these armed guards, were 4 or 5 of them, and they were in a little high school, which is where we had our county convention. But the rigging and the cheating started even at the precinct level. It was there. We won by the count, then they did a recount, and then they won. They put their slates up, and they got them right through, no problem, because they had actually engaged in much more ability to get out to get the local neighborhoods. And of course, our local sheriff was running for a delegate and got on their slate, and that was intimidating to have a local sheriff there at the precinct reorg. And then fast forward to go to the county reorg, it was brutal. It was not even a normal meeting. It was not run like a normal convention. They gavelled every single reasonable person who was trying to make a point of order to say that their ballots were flawed, and the ballots were in fact flawed. And they went about adopting the rules incorrectly. So the new rules that they adopted were flawed. And then the next thing that was flawed was basically the fact that they hadn't given notice of any rule changes. And whenever somebody went up to make a point of order about that, they gavelled them away. They said, you're out of order. And then the armed guards would come down. So the people had to walk away. And there was such intimidation. It was voter intimidation. It was election interference at the most fundamental level. And any Republican Party, they're calling themselves a Republican Party, they are not acting like the Republican Party, should be investigated and decertified if they are not acting the way they should under the law for elections. In South Carolina, there is no such thing as election integrity right now that I'm aware of. The only people are patriot groups on the sidelines that are not either appointed by the governor or elected. Those parties, like Alan Wilson or the South Carolina Election Commission or even Governor McMaster, are not protecting election integrity. They are for the machines. They are not going to be, they stopped us from reviewing the cast vote records from 2022. We filed a lawsuit and it was dismissed because the judge did not want to go against the 2 attorney general opinions of Alan Wilson, which basically said that there was personally identifying information on the cast vote records, which is just blatantly not true. And we had expert witnesses that said that that wasn't true. He still has not gone back and corrected that. He hasn't done anything for the 2020 to preserve it. He didn't do anything in 2022. And he's getting on a bandwagon now, beating a drum about election integrity, but he does not mean it. He has not done it in the past. And he's the reason why we did not have the cast vote records to do an audit, because although Donald Trump won in South Carolina, the down ballot was a mess. And these machines are a mess. And the absolute incompetence that came out of the findings, that the discovery that we had in that one lawsuit was that if everything they were saying was true, it's incompetent at best, but also concerning and should be further investigated. That's one of the main things that our discovery revealed in that lawsuit, is that these things should be further investigated, and also the Republican Party in South Carolina should be decertified if it is manipulating and interfering with election integrity, and it's supposed to actually be the guard for election integrity. They won't ever do the right thing. They're not going to do the right thing. It's going to take an outside source investigating it and decertifying it if necessary. Thank you, and God bless.